Yesterday, Sayadaw explained about Vedayita Sukha and Avedayita Sukha. Vedayita Sukha is the happiness one gains by having contact with the 6 kinds of objects. And Avedayita Sukha is the kind of happiness that is not relating to contact with the 6 kinds of objects. Avedayita Sukha is also called Sandhi Sukha. But ordinary people and the majority of the people, they like Vedayita Sukha. They like the kind of happiness one gains by coming into contact with the 6 objects. They think that Vedayita Sukha is very good, especially they take pleasure, they enjoy seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, and so on. So they enjoy the worldly pleasure, the worldly happiness in seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking. These ordinary people, they do not like Avedayita Sukha, they do not like Sandhi Sukha. Avedayita Sukha is free from defilements such as Raga, Dosa, Moha. Raga, the lust, lusting, having lust for desirable objects, and when one comes across undesirable objects, there will be anger, hatred, aversion, dissatisfaction. And people indulge in defilements such as Raga, Dosa, not knowing the flaws of it. And one does not know the flaws of it, one even think of them as good. People indulge in extreme form of Raga, Dosa, Moha, lust, hatred, and delusion. They take pleasure in indulging in these defilements. So they think that Avedayita Sukha is no good because it is not relating to contact with the sense objects. So they do not want to give up the worldly pleasure. They do not want to give up the worldly happiness. Avedayita Sukha has no feeling of contact of these sense objects, and thus they think that it is no good. They think that it is boring to have Avedayita Sukha. The 4 truths, the truth of suffering, the truth of origin of suffering, the truth of cessation of suffering, the truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering. People do not know these 4 truths. People do not know that suffering, people do not realize suffering as suffering, but instead they think of the suffering as good and pleasant. Not knowing suffering, they think of suffering as good and pleasant, and they think that nama rupa, mind and matter, are good and pleasant. They take pleasure in seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking, and they think that it is good to see, good to hear, good to smell, good to taste, good to touch, good to think, good to walk, and so on. So they are craving on these nama rupa, they are craving for good things to see, to hear, to smell, to taste, to touch, and so on. And they cling onto good things. Not knowing suffering as suffering is called apatipati avijja, ignorance, not knowing. Thinking suffering as pleasant and good, it is micca patipatti avijja, ignorance, knowing wrongly. In this way, there are a pair of avijja, avijja not knowing, and avijja knowing wrongly. Not seeing the flaws of these sense objects, not seeing the flaws of taking pleasure in sense objects, they think of them as good and pleasant. So they are craving for better and better things. They are craving for better things and best things. In this way, Dhamma and Upadana, craving and clinging, arise due to ignorance. What is really present is the suffering, but they think that things are pleasant. Based on these defilements, avijja, dhamma, and upadana, based on these defilements of ignorance, craving, and clinging, people conduct good and bad deeds. People conduct various deeds, wholesome and unwholesome, and thus the round of deeds keep on rotating. So people perform good and bad deeds that lead to further assistances. Further assistances are arising as the resultant, and because of this resultant of further assistances, there will be more suffering. Not knowing the origin of suffering, they think that it is good. They think as it is good and pleasant, so they are knowing wrongly. They are knowing in opposite ways. So in this way, there are two kinds of ignorance: taking suffering as not knowing suffering as suffering. It is avijja, apatipatti avijja, knowing, not knowing. Knowing wrongly, thinking suffering as pleasant, it is micca patipatti avijja, knowing wrongly. In this way, a pair of ignorance can arise. The cause of suffering, when it comes to cessation, there will be avedayita sukha. When suffering comes to a cessation, one will enjoy avedayita sukha. In other words, it is sandhi sukha. When the three rounds of defilement, rounds of deeds or action, and rounds of resultants come to a cessation, one will gain avedayita sukha, or in other words, sandhi sukha. So avedayita sukha or sandhi sukha means the kind of happiness one gains when the three rounds, kilesavada, kamavada, and vipakavada, round of defilement, round of deed, and round of resultants, comes to a cessation. Not knowing things as suffering, one craves onto them, one clings onto them, and thus, based on these defilements of ignorance, craving, and clinging, one performs good and bad deeds, and because of good and bad deeds, there will be results, and thus the three rounds keep on rotating. But when the three rounds of defilement, rounds of deeds, and rounds of resultants come to a cessation, one will gain avedayita sukha or sandhi sukha. But people who have ignorance, they think that when nama rupa, mind and matter, come to a cessation, when the three rounds, kilesavada, kamavada, and vipakavada, come to a cessation, so they think that when there is cessation, they think that there is nothing to do and it will be very boring. not knowing the true happiness, not knowing the true peacefulness, there is apatipatti avijja, not knowing, and they think that it is suffering to get avedayita sukha, and it will be micca patipatti avijja, knowing wrongly. People who have great degree of avijja, tanha and upadana, people who have strong avijja, tanha and upadana, they do not like avedayita sukha, they dislike sandhi sukha. And not only dislike, they hate sandhi sukha because they think that it is a great death, not having any contact with sense objects. Magga Sajja, it is the path leading to Nibbana, it is the path leading to avedayita sukha or sandhi sukha. Not knowing that the Eightfold Noble Path is the way to attain the genuine happiness, they think that the Eighth Noble Path is the way to great death. They think that the Eightfold Noble Path is the way to great death, where one cannot return to this happiness. So they dislike Eightfold Noble Path because they do not want to practice, they do not want the real happiness because they think that Eightfold Noble Path is the way to great death. So they think that there is no use to practice the Eightfold Noble Path. And not knowing that cessation is the genuine happiness, it is the genuine peacefulness, they do not want the sandhi sukha. And they think that sandhi sukha is suffering. In this way, a pair of ignorance, not knowing and knowing wrongly arises. In this way, there are 8 kinds of ignorance, not knowing and knowing wrongly on the full truth. Having avijja, ignorance, one will not know the truth. If one is not mindful on the presently arising object, there will be avijja, ignorance, and there will be moha padala, there will be great intense layers of delusion. And thus, one will not know mind and matter, one will be dim, vague, and deluded about these mind and matter. Just like when there is cataract in the eye, one will not see, and even if one sees, one will see wrongly. In the same way, when the people have cataract of delusion, when there is thick, intense layer of delusion compared to cataract, one will not know the truth and one will know wrongly. People who have great avijja, tanha and upadana, people who have strong ignorance, craving and clinging, they take suffering as good and pleasant, and thus they do not want to attain avedayita sukha because they think that not coming into contact with the sense object, having no feeling of the sense object, is a great death. In order to stop the 3 rounds, the round of defilement, the round of deeds, and the round of resultants, it is more important to cut the round of kilesa, defilement. Not knowing and knowing wrongly, there is ignorance, and based on this not knowing and knowing wrongly, craving arises, and one also clings onto it. So among the 3 rounds, kilesa vata, the round of defilement, the round of avijja, tanha and upadana, ignorance, craving and clinging, plays an important role. Avijja, tanha, and upadana, ignorance, craving, and clinging, is the opposite of sandhi sukha. Sandhi sukha is the cessation of the three rounds. Having the opposite states, avijja, tanha, and upadana, ignorance, craving, and clinging, having the kilesavada, one cannot gain sandhi sukha. Sandhi sukha is the opposite of the kilesa, opposite of avijja, tanha, and upadana. In order to gain cessation from these defilements momentarily, one needs to be mindful at the moment of arising. One needs to have sustained mindfulness. In order to have sustained mindfulness, one should exert effort so that the noting mind will reach the object of meditation. One needs ardent effort so that the noting mind is pushed towards the object of meditation. When there is ardent effort, kilesa defilements are not accepted into the mind, and thus there will not be craving or clinging onto the object. When the mind is sustained onto the object, when there is mindfulness, mindfulness protects the mind so that kilesa defilements cannot enter. So and thus, having ardent effort, there will be sustained mindfulness. Kilesa defilements are not accepted. The mind is protected away from these defilements, and thus avijja, tanha, and upadana, ignorance, craving, and clinging, has no chance to arise. When the mind is calm and collected on the object, there will not be distraction, the mind will not scatter, there will not be remorse or regret, the mind will not be agitated by raga, dosa, or moha, and thus the mind is calm, collected, unified, and thus samadhi, concentration, is developed. When there is concentration, when there is samadhi, then kilesa defilements are distanced. When the mind is calm and collected on the object, one knows the true nature and one develops knowledge. Developing knowledge, one removes not knowing and knowing wrongly. So in place of avijja, ignorance, knowledge develops when the mind is calm and collected on the object of meditation. When there is when there is knowledge, avijja is removed, and when there is no avijja, tanha and upadana, ignorance, that craving and clinging does not arise. Lack of avijja, ignorance, craving and clinging will not arise. In this way, the round of defilements, kilesa vada, will come to a cessation momentarily. So when the person is mindful for one moment, there will be one moment the kilesa vada comes to a cessation. And if the person is mindful for 1 minute, there will be 1 minute of cessation of these kilesa defilements. In each noting, there are 8 factors of the path, and when kilesa defilements does not arise, karma, deeds and actions will not be developed. Without kilesa defilements, one does not commit good and bad deeds that leads to further existences, and thus lack of karma vada, vipaka vada, round of resultants will also come to a cessation, and thus there will not be further assistances. When Kilesavada round of defilements come to a cease, come to a cessation, the other two rounds, Kamavada, Vipakavada, round of deeds and round of resultants, will also come to a cessation. So by overcoming the opposite states, by overcoming these defilements, avijja, tasna and upadana, ignorance, craving and clinging, one is walking the path in order to gain sandhi sukha. Removing the defilements, avijja, tasna and upadana, ignorance, craving and clinging, is the most important. In order to gain sandhi sukha, one should remove the defilements, avijja, tasna and upadana. In order to remove avijja, tasna and upadana, one needs to practice systematically according to the correct method. Without the correct method of practice, one cannot remove the defilements, one cannot remove avijja, tasna and upadana without practicing correctly, and one will not gain sandhi sukha without correct practice. In order to gain sandhi sukha, one should remove the kilesa defilements, and in order to remove kilesa defilements, one should practice systematically according to the correct method. When one is mindful for one moment, one will know the true nature for one moment, and for that moment, one is removing kilesavada, round of defilement. By knowing dukkha sattva, by knowing truth of suffering, when knowledge is developed, one removes not knowing and knowing wrongly. So in this way, by knowing dukkha sattva, by knowing the truth of suffering, one also removes ignorance. Lack of ignorance, one will no longer crave onto objects, and one will no longer cling onto objects when there is lack of avijja. In this way, knowing correctly, avijja, ignorance will be removed. When avijja is removed, craving, clinging will also be removed. Lack of avijja, ignorance, there will not be craving and there will not be clinging. When one removes tanha, craving, one also overcomes the origin of suffering. One removes samudaya sattva, the origin of suffering. By discerning dukkha sattva, the truth of suffering, one removes tanha, craving, and thus samudaya sattva, the origin of suffering, has no chance to arise. So when one analyzes each moment of being mindful, each moment of developing knowledge, one removes avijja, ignorance, tanha, craving, and upadana, clinging. By practicing the 8 noble paths, the 3 rounds will come to a cessation, and it is called nirodha. Nirodha means cessation. At the moment the person is being mindful, at the moment the person is knowing correctly, there will be momentary cessation of these 3 rounds. It is the momentary cessation, and it is called the Danga Nirodha, momentary cessation. So one gains or one attains momentary cessation, and this momentary cessation arises automatically. So when one analyzes each noting consists of sila. form of avijja, tanha, and upadana. One removes gross ignorance, craving, and clinging with sila, morality. Refraining from misconduct, gross form of defilement have no chance to arise. And with samadhi, concentration, obsessive form of defilement that can manifest in the mind cannot arise. And with samadhi, concentration, one removes priyuttana kilesa, obsessive form of defilement that can manifest in the mind. Practicing samadhi, practicing concentration, one is preventing so that obsessive form of defilement cannot arise, and even if they arise, one removes it right away by noting. Noting the presently arising object, there is samadhi khanda, concentration group, which consists of viriya, sati, samadhi, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. If the yogi is able to note one moment, there will be one moment of samadhi khanda, one moment of concentration group. And as the yogi practices continuously, the moment of samadhi khanda, the moment of gaining concentration group will increase. So there will be the concentration group, the mind becomes small, from small to big, from tender to mature, and one develops bhavana. When the mind is aimed towards the object, there is samma sankappa, right application. When the noting mind is direct or face to face with the object, the person comes to know the true nature, there will be samma ditti, right view. Having samma sankappa, when the mind is aimed or directed towards the object of meditation, one discerns the true nature, and thus there will be samma ditti, right view. One discerns mind and matter, cause and effect, and the characteristics of impermanent suffering and non-self. When knowing correctly, there is panya magganga, wisdom group. The wisdom group, which consists of right application, samma sankappa, and samma ditti, right view. So at the moment of being mindful, when one develops knowledge, one is removing kilesa defilement, one is removing latent or dormant defilement momentarily, and thus kilesa vata, round of defilement, is coming to a cessation momentarily. So if there is mindfulness for 1 minute, there will be 1 minute of bhavana. One discerns the truth of suffering. One removes the origin of suffering, which is tanha, and one also attains momentary cessation, and one develops the 8 noble paths. So in each noting, there will be bhavana. When one develops knowledge, there will be discerning the truth of suffering, removing the origin of suffering, developing the 8 noble paths, and discerning the momentary cessation. In this way, the 4 noble truths will be involved in each noting. And by practicing systematically, the 4 noble truths will be discerned by practicing systematically according to the correct method. In this way, the 4 noble truths will be discerned as one is being mindful, and especially one is developing the 8 noble paths. By developing 8 noble paths, one is removing the defilements, avijja, tanha, and upadana, ignorance, craving, and clinging, and such defilements are distancing, and one gains momentary peace. One gains momentary peace. So in order to gain avedita sukha, in order to gain sandhi sukha, one needs to attain momentary peace. By attaining momentary peace over and over again, it will lead to the genuine peace. It will lead to avedita sukha and sandhi sukha. So when the round comes to a complete cessation, one attains Asanda Nirodha, the true cessation, the ultimate cessation. Only when one attains Ariya Magga, path knowledge, one realizes Nibbana, and one gains Sandhi Sukha. In order to gain Sandhi Sukha, in order to gain the true cessation, one needs to practice Upabaga Magga, preliminary path. By practicing the preliminary path, it can lead to Riya Magga Jnana, path knowledge, and one can realize Nibbana and attain Sandhi Sukha. In order to gain Riya Magga, one should practice the preliminary path continuously apart from sleeping hours. And when one's knowledge becomes ripe, one will finally attain Riya Magga, path knowledge, and one will attain the cessation. By attaining Riya Magga, one gains cessation and one attains Nibbana. By attaining Nibbana, the other three truths will also be realized. By attaining Nibbana, Dukkha Sattva will automatically be discerned. Magga Sattva is automatically developed. And also Samudaya Sattva, the origin of suffering, is automatically removed. At the moment of preliminary path, one discerns Dukkha Sattva, and by discerning Dukkha Sattva, the other three are automatically realized at the moment of Upabaga Magga, preliminary path. But when one attains Riya Magga, one realizes Nibbana. By realizing Nibbana, the true cessation, one automatically realizes the other three. One discerns the Dukkha Sattva, truth of suffering. One removes Samudaya Sattva, the origin of suffering. One develops Magga Sattva, the truth of the path leading to cessation, when one attains Nibbana. At the moment of Upabaga Magga, at the moment of preliminary path, one can remove kilesa defilements momentarily, but one cannot uproot these defilements at the moment of Upabaga Magga, preliminary path. As long as one has not attained Riya Magga, as long as one has not attained the path knowledge, the defilements can come back because one has not uprooted. But when one has attained Riya Magga, the path knowledge, one can uproot these defilements, and also the other three truths will automatically be realized when one attains Nibbana. Saraji gives an example. In an office, the staff carries out the procedure and also to complete the document. But if the document is not signed by the officer, and if the document is not sealed by the office, the document is not official. So actually, the staff has to carry out all the procedures in preparing the document, and only when the document is signed by the officer and the seal of the office is stamped, then the document becomes official and complete. Doing the procedures take a long time. Signing the document and stamping the seal takes just a moment. But without it, the document will not be official. In the same way, in order to realize Nibbana, one has to practice the preliminary path. One has to practice Upabaga Magga. And when one's knowledge becomes matured, one will attain Magga Jnana, path knowledge, and one will realize Nibbana. Realizing the Nibbana is only for a moment, but in order to realize Nibbana, one has to work preliminary path, Upabaga Magga, in order to attain Nibbana. Just like the staff has to work with all the procedures in preparing the document, and the document becomes official and complete only when it is signed. In the same way, the realization of the Nibbana will be complete only when one attains Magga Jnana, path knowledge, and one has to work the preliminary path in order to attain Magga Jnana, and by attaining Magga Jnana, one will realize the Nibbana. So, realizing Nibbana, one gains Avedita Sukha and Sandhi Sukha. And when one gets to the stage of realizing Nibbana, one realizes that Avedita Sukha, Sandhi Sukha surpasses many times than the worldly happiness. So one should at least practice in order to realize Nibbana by attaining the first path knowledge. So when one gets to the, before one attains Nibbana, one can doubt whether Avedita Sukha really exists. People can have doubt that how come there will be happiness or peacefulness when there is no feeling of the sense object. But when one has gotten to the stage of attaining Nibbana, one understands that Avedita Sukha really exists, and Avedita Sukha is not related with contact with a sense object. So Nibbana, the Avedita Sukha, cannot be realized by thinking about it or imagining about it. One cannot experience Avedita Sukha by thinking or imagining what it would be like. Sarojit is an example. In the Burmese history, there was a king who wanted to know what Nibbana was like. So he asked one of the wise men, he asked, what is the actual feeling of Nibbana? I try to ask to many people, but still I cannot get the answer. I cannot get the satisfactory answer. So the wise person replied this way. The wise said that he was a monk before. After he came out, he looked around and he went around in town. So when he went around in town, he overheard two sisters. One of the sisters was not married, one of the sisters was single, and the other sister was married. The sister who was single asked the married sister, how is the happiness of a married person? How is the happiness of a married life. So the married sister replied, if you want to know about it, get married and you will have the experience of a married life, and you will see how the happiness of a married life is. So the wise person gave the example to the king who wanted to know what it was like to realize Nibbana. So just like in the example, when the married sister says, you have to get married to know what it is like. In the same way, if someone wants to know how Nibbana is, one has to practice Vipassana meditation. And by attaining Nibbana, only when one has attained Nibbana by himself, by herself, one will know what Nibbana is like. So 1 hour is up. Strategy will continue tomorrow. Sadhu, sadhu.